people are going out there looking for things to improve their lives. Peptides have come into their global consciousness online or by influencers or whatnot, or even by physicians before 2023 that had prescribed these medicines. It stopped. All of a sudden, it stopped. And so it created a gray market out there that allowed things from China, from Afghanistan, from Lithuania, from different parts of the world that we have no certainty that it's what's coming. So what this recommendation does is it says the following. It says, look, now we will allow pharmacies to make these medicines based on validation, quality of the products, assurance that what it's being said that is there, and then in conjunction with the prescription of a physician, you will be able to get those to the patients, right? It is two different worlds, Aaron. One world, you're flying blind. You think you're getting ipamorelin or you think you're getting PPC 157, and you're not. At best, you might be getting like nothing. At worst, you could be getting some poison.
That's right. All I want is money, 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 money. Give me some. All I need
Welcome
is
to the Incentives Lab. I'm Aaron Baer with Governor Ricardo Rosselló. All problems are incentive problems. Welcome, everybody. We're very excited to launch the Incentives Lab. And today is my co-founder and partner, former governor of Puerto Rico and a PhD in bioengineering that is now I want to share his story of his peptide journey of creating the incentives to get peptides back available to the public. So welcome, Ricky.
Thank you, Aaron. Happy to be here and excited to talk about this topic and how it relates to our joint effort for incentives.
Now, so a lot of people know you as a former governor, but a lot of them don't know that you truly are a nerd in chief with a PhD in bioengineering, and you've been leading a journey in peptides. So maybe share us how you got on that journey to be at the national level of kind of helping peptides come to market.
Well, my professional formation is as a bioengineer and neuroscientist. So I've always had a passion for this field. I kind of took a left turn into politics at one time. And what I think it gives me now, in collaboration with a lot of great professionals that have been working along with the American Academy of Peptide Medicine, gives me a distinct perspective on not only the scientific aspect and the scientific conversation behind peptides and stem cells and other elements, but by the same token, the public policy perspective on things. Sometimes science and policy seem to be at odds, while science tends to try to dive in deeper and is seldomly, very, very strong with conclusions. In the public policy sphere, we often have to answer questions, even with uncertainty, even with incomplete data, with what we feel is going to be the best solution for society. So with those two hats, we went this past week to the FDA, and there was a pharmacy compounding committee that was assembled to establish the following questions. Should a list of 7 peptides, we can discuss them, but should a list of 7 peptides be added back to a pharmacy compounding bulk list, which would make it accessible to pharmacies in the United States, would make it accessible to physicians in the United States, so they can prescribe as needed? Or should they stay out of that bulking element, which in 2023, that was the decision that was taken. And so we can discuss the ramifications, sort of the incentives that go along with it. But the outcome was that The recommendation of the committee is that they 6 out of the 7 peptides will go back on to the bulk list and will be accessible if the FDA and if HHS approve that recommendation.
Wow. So Ricky, share a little bit about that process for people that don't understand. And maybe first share what a peptide is and what these 6 or 7 things that you're looking to get approved, what they do.
It's a great question. I mean, peptides are all the rage. People are talking about them online. You will see a lot of people promote them, and you actually do have access to them. You just have access to them in a way that's very hard to quantify their quality, or even if it is what you're taking, and you don't have to go through a physician. So what is a peptide? A peptide is essentially a short chain of amino acids. Think of proteins are as big molecules with, hundreds to thousands of amino acids. Peptides are on average are anywhere between 2 to 50 amino acids, right? So instead of being these massive proteins that are in our body, they kind of act as signaling molecules within our own body. Many of them happen naturally within our body. They just have, relative decay as we age. Some of the sensitivity gets lost as well. They influence a whole host of areas within our health, including, cognitive health, including regenerative capacity, stimulation of hormones, recovery, and sleeping, and so forth. So all of these small peptides, these short chain amino acids, have a potential role. Some of them have been studied within our body; they're naturally occurring, and some of them have been slightly modified, and others are de novo creations from science. So we have to look at them from that perspective. Although we call them peptides, they're about, there are 3 big buckets that we can look at them. And I think this first step was really focusing on the first bucket, maybe a little bit on the second, where it's either naturally occurring peptides that you want to amplify the signal on your body, or slightly modified so that they can stay within your body a little bit more.
Okay. So, and what was your process or your journey to kind of lead this effort, and obviously be in DC this week to testify on behalf of this? How did you get involved in this?
Well, I'm honored to be a part of the American Academy of Peptide Medicine. For a while now, we've been searching on ways to make peptides be able to be regulated in a clear fashion. We recognize that there are differences. We recognize that saying that something is approved by the FDA is quite different than having access to it. There's a lot of levels over here, but our main concern was from the following. Number one, certain peptides have shown to have great effects on a wide variety of patients, and secondly, because of those effects, when 2023 came along and we couldn't get access to the quality and validation over here in the States, people didn't just stop using peptides. They went elsewhere to go get them. If you have a cognitive condition and have been using one of the peptides that was looked at this past week, Semax, and then all of a sudden you don't have access to it, guess what? You're likely going to try to find a way to get access to it. And that's where the challenge came. I think the 2023 regulation might have come from good intent, which is something we discuss often with the incentives, Aaron. But the outcome was that when you stopped regulating and you turn a little bit of a blind eye to the peptide production here in the United States, patients are going to go elsewhere, and they're going to go elsewhere without their physicians, and they're going to go elsewhere without a validation that what they think they're getting is actually what they're getting. So it created a gray market. And to me, that's the most potent argument for starting to advance this. Look, we know that there are different types of peptides. We recognize some are naturally occurring. We recognize some are new, but turning a blind eye to the regulation is not going to stop people from taking them. What it does is it provokes a potential downside downstream where people are getting peptides or substances that are not those peptides and not getting well from them. All the contrary, might be getting sick. So this is the first step. I think that when this recommendation gets accepted, I'm confident that it will. Then we start having a framework in the United States where we allow pharmacies to compound things that are validated, that are said to be those peptides, and we allow the mechanism for a physician, a trained physician, to be the one that prescribes and asks for those peptides. And it's a game changer in my view.
So let's talk about this, since we're, you and I are creating this thing called the Incentives Lab, and we want to look at the, the visible incentives, the hidden incentives, and the perverse incentives. Obviously, in that conversation you just said of removing them from the market in 2023, there becomes some perverse incentives.
Right.
Can you maybe share from the Incentives Lab perspective, what are the things that we need to think about that we're not actually seeing in the public when we're making these decisions on behalf of the general public?
Well, again, I think, or I can buy the argument, not necessarily shared by everybody, but that the 2023 regulations were motivated by good intent. The problem was that you didn't follow that intent and that incentives. The intent was, hey, we understand that these there's still some science to be done on a lot of these peptides, and in order for us to support the use of these peptides, we need more. So we're gonna shuffling to the side. The motivation or the incentive was, look, let's hold on. It's very scientific. Let's hold on until we have more data. But the truth of the matter is that how innovation and how science, and in particular medical science, has progressed, in the last century, is that there are some phases of experimentation. There are some levels to the regulation, and if we're going to be open to a brand new world, even with other elements on biotech, on AI, and so forth, we need to be mindful that we're going to have to start establishing how to change those frameworks, how to establish those regulatory frameworks. So that's one. Another perverse incentive of why people might be opposed to the peptides is the money making aspect of it, right? And let me try to explain it very plainly. There is not a lot of money to be made by investing hundreds of millions of dollars on clinical trials on these peptides. Why? Because companies can't patent many of them, right? Some of them they can. That's what's happened with GLP-1s, which is a peptide, but some of them they can't. So you have these peptides that have been used extensively, some of them in Russia, some of them, elsewhere in the world, for decades. And there's decades of clinical relevant evidence, but there's not been a clinical trial. And so the biggest obstacle towards those trials, Aaron, is that they cost a lot of money. And so if there's no money on the end of it, why would you invest a couple $100 million on a trial just to prove that it works? So that's been a little bit of the hurdle, and the way to sidestep that is to work with the physicians, to get all of the data that they have, to see the secondary effects, which, by the way, many of these peptides that we're seeing, the 7, they have a record of low to none adverse effects, which is a very positive outcome. But we also want to make sure that the claims that we're making out of them actually happen, right? Or have a significant opportunity of happening. So a perverse incentive from let's say a pharmaceutical company would be, These are not money making. They might drive away from our money making patented drugs, and therefore we're gonna oppose them, right? So that's a few examples of the incentives that I see in this whole process right now.
So, Ricky, going through this experience and getting 6 of the 7, can you tell us why one of them did not get through this committee and why the other 6 did?
Well, I think, when you go over there and you look at this process, it's big room. There's these big tables with experts on the subject matter that range from clinicians to scientists, patient advocacy experts, and so forth. And in my opinion, they've done their work, right? They've done their job. They've asked the right questions. They listened to the public comments and so forth. To me, it's just a showcase that this was not just a one side, it wasn't a political agenda one way or the other, right? It wasn't to either block peptides or accept them. They took their time, evaluated each of the peptides independently, and they came out with a conclusion as committee that one of them didn't meet the criteria right now. There were some higher levels of concern of it being that accessible to the public, whereas the others did. Right. And again, have to highlight that this does not mean that the FDA would approve these. In fact, the FDA was in that meeting, and for all of the peptides, they said that they believe there's still not enough clinical evidence. And that's what you should expect from the FDA, right? But that's not the question here. The question is not, are these peptides scientifically doing X, Y, and Z, and have they been proven? It's what is the access to these medicines with a physician to make sure that they are highest quality and that we can move the wheel of innovation forward in another route.
So, obviously, this is a big step forward for these. What are the next steps in this journey to kind of help people get more access to peptides?
So here is what I think it's game changing, and it's important about this decision. Again, think about it. Forget the science hat. Forget the nerding out. Forget everything else. Right now, people are going out there looking for things to improve their lives. Peptides have come into their global consciousness online or by influencers or whatnot, or even by physicians before 2023 that had prescribed these medicines. It stopped. All of a sudden it stopped. And so it created a gray market out there that allowed things from China, from Afghanistan, from, Lithuania, from different parts of the world that we have no certainty that it's what's coming. So what this recommendation does is it says the following. It says, look, now we will allow pharmacies to make these medicines based on validation, quality of the products, assurance that what it's being said that is there, and then in conjunction with the prescription of a physician, you will be able to get those to the patients, right? It is two different worlds, Aaron. One world, you're flying blind. You think you're getting ipamorelin or you think you're getting PPC 157, and you're not. At best, you might be getting like nothing. At worst, you could be getting some poison, right? Once this gets established, it happens. It'll happen in a way over here where both patients and doctors will know what it is that they could be getting, and the doctors can fully decide not to use it, right? Or the patients can fully decide not to use it. And perhaps an analogy can clear it up. When I was governor of Puerto Rico, 20 years before I came to office, there was an issue on the island with pit bulls. And so the solution at that point, Aaron, was well, let's outlaw pit bulls in Puerto Rico because they're creating so much problems. And what do you think happened? Well,
people started breeding them because there was a black market to buy pit bulls. So
that's right. So people started breeding them. You're right. And then the other side of it is that because they were not regulated, you couldn't take them to a vet. And so when people were done with the pit bulls, they just released them out in the wild. So there were the relatively small problem. I don't want to minimize it, but the relatively small problem of pit bulls in the 1990s became a huge problem of pit bulls everywhere, unregulated. Vets couldn't see it and so forth. And I have to recognize my wife Beatrice because she was a leading a champion on this. After this, after we saw the data, we were like, okay, I recognize that there are some objections to having pit bulls, but this solution right now is definitely worse. Right, the medicine is worse than the disease, and so what we did was we added pit bulls back as a formal regulated dog, and now there wasn't that secondary market. Now people could take their pit bulls to to the vets and so forth. And it's kind of analogous to that, right? It's not that we're saying one solution is perfect and the other's not. Public policy often never goes that way, but it is clearly asking the following question: which of these solutions is better for the people? Is it the solution that leads them to an unknown gray market where we don't advance the science, where people are just going to keep on doing it, and where people will likely get sick, but we will have no trace of that? Or is it better to treat innovation as we have in the past, where it's like we're gonna check that it passes the safety and efficacy tests. Physicians are going to be able to prescribe something that they know is being prescribed. And if there's any effects, we can track it, measure it, and we can see the science as it unfolds. I clearly think with my policy hat that the second route is definitely much better, and we can build upon that route much more effectively than the one we're currently at.
Right. So this creates visible incentives, and obviously you can start collecting the data from the physicians, creating, the basis for a future for some medicine that is for the health of people, but there's not a lot of profit in it. So it's an interesting story. Your story about pit bulls reminds me of in India, they had a gathering of cobras. I think they were like, let's gather cobras. And then they gave a bounty for every cobra you brought in. And so then everybody started breeding cobras. And then when they gave up the bounty, they just let all the cobras go. So it was literally an identical problem to your pit bulls. Is we have to think about the unintended consequences of making a decision or not making a decision on behalf of the greater good of people, to understand how do we move society forward so that we move it in a way that we can learn and grow and innovate, especially in the global landscape where we're so competitive globally. Where we will miss out on opportunities and honestly, the innovation will move around the world. And that's what happens when you stifle it is, it is about open boundaries of intellects so that we can cross borders and learn and grow from each other. And, at the incentives lab, I think that's what, we want to study the most is not only the personal incentives of why you'd want to take peptides and why they would help you improve and be on an education journey and talking to your physician and what's right for you, but also on the other side, on the government, is how do you regulate them? How do you actually create the right incentives so that we create a future that has better, what we talk about is health span and longevity versus a sick care system that's just a reactive, to some of these issues. And obviously peptides put people in the mindset of actually taking care of their health and moving in the right direction. So there's an incentive right there. Any other last thoughts on this, Ricky, as you've kind of, had a couple days in DC that you had a big win, but what are your last thoughts on this to share with people tuning in for the first time to the Incentives Lab?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank the committee and the FDA and the American Academy of Peptide Medicine. I mean, we've done our work, sometimes at different sides of the argument, but the point, and to your idea and to your thought about the incentives, is we have visibility now. Now there's a record. Now there's a stepping stone towards making decisions that we kind of took a blind eye approach to it before. And I think this goes way beyond peptides, Aaron. I think this is the same discussion we're going to have with stem cells, with CRISPR, with artificial intelligence. How do we start moving the needles in such ways where it's not just like this one side versus the other? And then in the spirit of making that discussion happen and having those uncomfortable discussions, which will provide the progress forward, I think identifying those incentives and really questioning those incentives. What is it that's driving this decision? There are some incentives, Aaron, as you pointed out, that are clear and visible, and those are easy. But there are some that are stuck in the back of our brains, in the back of our institutions, that have been there, that are part of their DNA, that we just overlook, that we take for granted, and then we assume are going in the right direction. So I think this event, this occurrence, signifies why it's so important for us to question the assumptions, look at the incentives, see if we can tinker with one or two. And our experience, and I'm sure you and I will be sharing a lot about this in the future, is that, you don't really even have to tackle all of them. The moment you identify one or two key levers, key incentives that are just pushing you in the wrong direction, and that you rationalize about it, and that you discuss it and observe it and think about it, and then you make the change, like life-changing elements will happen. People will have better quality of life. They will have better institutions. They will have more trust in those institutions and so forth. So I would say stay tuned to further installments of the Incentives Labs, and come along with us in this beautiful journey.
Yeah, no, to finish it off, just to recap this, incentives are what, I say there are no problems. There's just incentives that create problems. And, what Governor Rosselló and I, our goal of launching the Incentive Lab is to make people aware of these incentives, whether they're hidden or invisible or perverse, and sometimes embedded so deeply in organizations and institutions that we don't see them, as well as right in your face, and they may be obvious to some and not to others. We want to expose those to create the awareness so that people have agency to start pushing on these to make it a better world, because they understand the incentives that are against them or for them. But in the end, creating the agency to understand how you can actually take charge of your future. And very proud of being partners with Governor Ricky Rosselló, who is moving us into a future where we're going to have choices to make in the future around the decisions and incentives that are made. And we're excited to share this on all kinds of realms beyond peptides in future installments of the Incentives Lab. So I'm Aaron Baer, and with me is
Ricardo Rosselló.
So I'm not able to say it like that. But we're the Incentives Lab, and we'll see you next time here. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to the Incentives Lab. I'm Aaron Baer with Governor Ricardo Rosselló. We want to incentivize you to go to our website, theincentiveslab.com, take our free assessments, and learn more how incentives are running every aspect of your life. We'll see you next week with more incentives.